Welcome back to River Stories with Captain Harold Demarrero, Volume 5. We're here with Captain. Captain, you want to go back to your Coast Guard career? Take it away.
Yeah, I've got my Coast Guard folder out, and I went bounced back and forth between the Coast Guard and the barge industry, and sometimes I would get back captain on a boat, and then sometimes I'd take a job running a company, and but every year or two, I would always look for a job in the Coast Guard that lasted several months. Then I could go back into the Coast Guard and just change my life, because definitely it does. And so I signed up for this training program to go down and teach. They had a new law that was passed that allowed the Coast Guard to inspect the equipment on foreign ships and see if it was up to snuff, see if they had the right radar, and there were certain things they had to have, and they had to work. And so my job was I was assigned to the captain of the port. My job was to train people to go out and board these ships, and basically what I did was, for most of that time, is I just went out and did it myself, and then I would come back to the base and tell them what I did, and there was a guy there writing up the program. But while I was there, unfortunate, I was on my way. I was actually living at the naval base at Algiers in New Orleans, and driving over to the captain of the port across the river each day. And I was going to work, and I noticed, I saw all the smoke coming up from the river, because it's so flat down in Louisiana that you can see, and I saw something was going on. So when I got to the base, I found out that there was a 120,000 barrel Greek tanker. There was on fire, burning out of control, and it was anchored right between the ferries and pretty much close to the French Quarter and all that area, and had 120,000 barrels of Arabian crude on it. Now the captain and the crew had abandoned ship and left it. It was anchored there, burning, and there was a state pilot that was on board that was supposed to be in charge of maneuvering it and everything, and he left. And so they brought me in. Captain Dan Charter was captain of the port, and he brought me in his office, and he says, here's the situation. We've got this ship burning out of control. I've been talking to the guys. I was wondering what would happen if we just sank it. And I said, you don't want to sink a 120,000 barrel ship in the New Orleans harbor. You'll be bubbling up oil for the next 150 years. So he said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, I would go out, and I said, first of all, let me go out and look at it. So they took us, hired a helicopter, or it wasn't a Coast Guard helicopter, it was an outside helicopter. Come over and took us over and set us on the deck. And there was all the Coast Guard boats, firefighting boats, they were surrounding the stern of this thing, and they were trying to put the fire out, along with the 2 New Orleans harbor tugs, the firefighting tugs. They were both there, and everything else you could imagine was there. And they wasn't having much luck. This fire was burning out of control. So I looked at it, and I told the captain, I said, well, if it were up to me, I said, what I would do is I'd get a couple of tugs on each side of the bow, and I said, you got a pretty good sized Coast Guard vessel on the one side of the stern. We'll get another tug for the other side, and we'll cut the anchor. I'll get a portable acetylene tank upper. We'll cut the anchor cable, let the anchor fall away, which it did. and we just started floating the thing down the river. When I wanted to keep it in, the current was only about a mile an hour, so I just, slow moving this way, slow moving that away, and we was going down the river, and we got around the first turn, and I looked over, and I really wasn't that familiar with this part of the area, but I was the one who was in charge. And I saw this little road coming up, right up to the riverbank. And because I knew this thing was probably going to have to be unloaded with trucks. So I took the tugs off the inside, pushed it against the bank, dropped the other anchor, and there it's set. And so, and I got a letter of commendation from Admiral Barrow, for the job that I did training the base New Orleans to he said, putting your civilian background as a first-class pilot to excellent use, you quickly develop procedures and techniques to implement the enforcement of the navigational safety and vessel inspection regulations. I got some respect that time. And it was kind of exciting, as we was floating down the river. They had everything was stopped in New Orleans. It was a down, till that ship got out of there, and traffic it halted from both sides of the river. So and they gave the whole base commendation medal, and since I was assigned to the base, I got a unit commendation. So.
Did you get to spend much time in New Orleans?
Oh yeah, I did. Most of my active duty was in New Orleans. I love New Orleans. I used to go down at night. When I was living on the base, and I would dress up and sometimes I had my uniform on. Come up on Bourbon Street, and I loved to play piano, jazz, and so there was a band playing there. Walter Williams and his band was right there on the corner, one of the places. And I went in and introduced myself to them. And next thing you know, they didn't have a piano player. And I played night after night there. I didn't get any pay, but I sure had a lot of fun.
Did you drink free?
Drink free, yeah.
Got any more stories? Coast Guard, you got a couple minutes left. Anything, short story you'd like to share?
Well, there's so many times and so many things in the Coast Guard, that I think if I did another one, it would have to last longer than 3 minutes.
Okay, then we'll wrap this one up and we'll start another one and come back to check out Volume 6 of River Stories with Captain Harold Demarrero.